Warning: this episode contains content that may be disturbing to some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. In March of 2015, the wrestling world was shook to its core as popular Mexican wrestler Perro Aguayo Jr. died in the ring at just 35 years old. And international wrestling legend and icon Rey Mysterio was the man who gave Perro Aguayo Jr. the final blow. Aguayo died instantly, and it was later revealed that he had died from cardiac arrest, stemming from cervical spine trauma as a result of Rey Mysterio's flying kick. The Mexican police even considered giving Rey Mysterio a manslaughter charge, and he also suffered a slew of death threats toward him. Rey even considered quitting wrestling after this incident. A lot of narratives have been concocted, but what really happened on that fateful day? Could this unfortunate accident have been avoided? Is Rey Mysterio really at fault for the death of Perro Aguayo Jr.? Perro Aguayo Jr. is a real-life son of Mexican wrestling legend Perro Aguayo Sr., who was one of Mexico's biggest wrestling stars of the 20th century. He was a massive heel in Mexico and was described as a cross between Terry Funk and Bruno Sammartino. He was also the first wrestler to win the then WWF Light Heavyweight Championship, although reigns before 1997 are not recognized by the company. He was a legend in Mexico and was one of the founders of AAA, which has since become the biggest wrestling promotion in Mexico today, and his son, Perro Aguayo Jr. was one of the biggest stars of this promotion. Aguayo Jr. took after his father as he became one of the most popular and charismatic wrestlers in Mexico. He was a gigantic star and arguably the top villain in Mexican wrestling at the time of his death. For those who don't understand how much of a big deal he was in Mexico, in 2015, Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter quantified how big he was in Mexico when he was asked to name equivalent WWE wrestlers, and he said this: "I'd say very much the level of Triple H from several years back. Randy Orton may be the best comparison, but I would say bigger than Orton, maybe even like Randy Savage. In short, Perro Aguayo Jr. was a big deal in Mexican wrestling and was a significant draw in the Mexican wrestling scene." As for Rey Mysterio, not much of an introduction is needed. He's a living legend who is a multi-time world champion and has revolutionized the way smaller wrestlers are perceived in WWE and wrestling as a whole. He left WWE in 2015 after a 13-year tenure in the company, and he immediately went to Mexico to wrestle there. So because he was one of the biggest Mexican wrestling babyfaces of all time, why not go after the big fish, someone considered as the best villain in Mexico, Perro Aguayo Jr.? Rey did just that, but little did he know that the tag match he would wrestle with Aguayo Jr. would be Aguayo Jr.'s last ever match. On 20 March 2015, Aguayo Jr. would team up with Manik to face Rey Mysterio Jr. and Extreme Tiger at a show in Tijuana, Mexico. The day came along, and right before the match, Aguayo Jr. was in good spirits as he cut a heel promo to the camera. But one significant thing that he said during the interview was that everyone who came to see Rey Mysterio fight him was going to cry in the end. And he was right, but he didn't know the crowd was going to be crying for a completely different reason than the one in his head at that time. The match started and the crowd was really feeling the match. After about 5 to 6 minutes, things then go tits up. Mysterio went for a head scissors takedown that was supposed to propel Aguayo Jr. into the ropes for his finisher, the 619, but according to Mysterio, Aguayo instead mistakenly went through the middle of the ropes to bump on the apron, then went outside. Quickly realizing his mistake, Aguayo came back shooting in the ring, and Mysterio dropkicked him in the shoulder to set up for Mysterio's 619. And at this time, Aguayo landed on the middle rope, which is the proper position for the 619. Aguayo attempted to stand up with his left leg, but it collapsed. His partner Manik then fell to the second rope, but Manik realized even before the 619 attempt that something was wrong, as Aguayo appeared to be limp and unconscious. Mysterio then went for the 619, and Manik ducked, but Aguayo just stayed there, stumped over the ropes. Mysterio was clearly confused as he stood in the middle of the ring. Manik then tried to wake up Aguayo by pulling him off the middle rope, but instead he just fell to the bottom rope. He was clearly unconscious at that point. Rey decided to check on him and was getting no responses, so he proceeded to tell the ref that something was seriously wrong. Then Conan, who was at ringside at the time, pushed Aguayo off the first rope, causing him to hit his head on the mat and began shaking him a lot in order to try and wake him up. Rey and the other wrestlers then finished the match, with Rey and Extreme Tiger picking up the win, but nobody really cared because all the focus was on Perro Aguayo Jr. With the match over, various personnel went to Aguayo, believing he was just unconscious and was in need of medical help. At this point, Rey Mysterio had a very concerned look on his face. Aguayo Jr. was not immediately attended to by a physician and was taken to the backstage on a piece of plywood. The event doctor backstage was attending to 2 other wrestlers on injuries that happened during the show, and one of these injuries was a spinal cord injury. So because they only had 1 stretcher, they couldn't kick that other wrestler off at the time. Aguayo was then rushed to the hospital. The doctor spent almost an hour trying to revive him, but he was pronounced dead at 1 a.m. on March 21, 2015. According to the initial statement by the hospital, he died from cervical spine trauma, reportedly as a result of the dropkick by Rey Mysterio that propelled him forward into the ropes, causing severe whiplash trauma that snapped his neck. The cause of death was later determined as cardiac arrest due to cervical stroke caused by 3 fractured vertebrae. The coroner stated that Aguayo died almost instantly after getting whiplash from the ropes after Mysterio's kick. The crazy part is, when you watch it back, Rey's kick and the whiplash that he suffered doesn't look all that bad, just standard wrestling. But no, this is what killed a man in an instant. According to Rey Mysterio Sr., Rey's uncle, he said that the way that Perro Aguayo Jr. fell out of the ring before Rey's final kick was what really caused his neck to snap, and not Rey's dropkick to him that caused his whiplash. He explained how wrestlers are taught how to fall outside the ring in a way that doesn't hurt them, and he said that Aguayo Jr. did it completely wrong and ended up injuring his neck with the way that he fell outside. Rey Mysterio Sr. also revealed that Aguayo Jr. actually had problems with his spinal cord even before his final match. Aguayo Jr. was buried just 2 days after he died in Mexico, and at his funeral, Rey and Konnan served as pallbearers. Rey attended the funeral without his mask as a sign of respect for him. Mysterio's wife even stated that he went to the funeral as a human being and not a wrestler. He was very heartbroken at the funeral as he faced Aguayo's family and gave them his condolences. Several Mexican promotions paid tribute to Aguayo Jr. after his death. AAA had an hour-long tribute show dedicated to him, covering his career. Lucha Underground also paid tribute to him after his death, with Vampiro, Konnan, and El Hijo del Fantasma giving emotional speeches about him, as well as honoring him with a 10-bell salute. Several WWE employees, including Stephanie McMahon, Daniel Bryan, Paul Heyman, Paige, and more, also gave their thoughts on the incident, and they gave their condolences to his family. It was a tragic loss for the wrestling world. Rey Mysterio was especially feeling very sad about the loss of his friends, as he tweeted out, "A friendship of brothers was formed that started years ago, and we should not question God's designs." He tweeted this along with a picture of him and Aguayo when they were younger, wrestlers just starting out, and just before the match in which Aguayo Jr. lost his life. It's crazy how fate works, because Rey Mysterio was actually involved in the very first match that Aguayo Jr. ever wrestled in, and he was also involved in the last match in which Aguayo Jr. wrestled in as well. That's how deep their connection goes. In another interview, Rey said this regarding Perro Aguayo Jr. "We lost the biggest superstar that Mexico has ever seen. There were so many plans moving forward that would have been incredible. When I meet great people in the industry, I like to let them know that they are great human beings. Perro was definitely one of them. He was so warm-hearted, kind, and respectful. Just like there will never be another Eddie, there will never be another Perro." This was very heartfelt by Rey Mysterio, but at the end of the day, Rey's kick was the last wrestling move that Perro ever took, and that caused there to be some trouble for Rey regarding this incident. Right after Aguayo Jr. died, police began an investigation into his death, and criminal charges for manslaughter were on the table for Rey Mysterio. However, after some time, the Mexican police decided not to press charges against Mysterio, saying that it was an accident. However, this didn't stop wrestling fans from abusing Rey Mysterio and his family, blaming him for Aguayo Jr.'s death. Many people on the internet were sending death threats to him because they felt that his reckless wrestling took one of their heroes away. In reality, it wasn't as black and white as the wrestling fans made it out to be. It was much more complicated than that. Rey did give Perro Aguayo Jr. the kick that ultimately ended his life, but this kick was more than likely the straw that broke the camel's back. A lot of fans didn't understand this, so they lashed out at Rey, so much so that at the press conference at Aguayo Jr.'s funeral, the family had to let everybody know that Rey Mysterio was not to blame for his death, and fans should leave Rey and his family alone. The fans lost one of their heroes, and they were so angry at what happened that they even started to blame Konnan for the way he was shaking him after Aguayo Jr. had passed out. But even though some attention was directed at Konnan, most of it was directed at Rey Mysterio. Rey found this to be a very difficult period in his life, and he detailed in interviews how this incident caused him to doubt himself and his abilities. So much so that after this incident, Rey considered retiring from wrestling altogether due to his depression over what had happened. Thankfully, Rey got out of his funk that he was in.
The accident with Perro.
Yeah.
The fans were like, "Rey, come on, man. We know what happened. You can't.
Right.
You can't let this affect you."
Yeah.
Rey's family was really important in supporting him through the terrible feelings that he had regarding Aguayo Jr.'s death, and he ultimately decided not to quit wrestling. What happened to Perro Aguayo Jr. was very unfortunate, but it just puts into perspective how dangerous wrestling really is. Considering all that his body had been through, a simple kick was able to take Perro Aguayo Jr.'s life out. It's not Rey Mysterio's fault because this is just the nature of wrestling, and unfortunately, Aguayo Jr. died that day. The silver lining in this situation is that Aguayo Jr. died doing what he loved, and he had a career filled with accomplishments other people would only dream of. He's also been inducted in the AAA and Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame. What a career he had. Rest in peace, El Hijo del Perro Aguayo. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed this video, please check out our other videos. Also, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. But anyway, goodbye.